people think, well, I don't know how to do this, so I can't do it. And so it's like, well, I don't know how to do that, so that obviously I can't do it. But anything of significance that a person has achieved over their life, they didn't know how to do it when they started. A quantum leap is one of those things that's dead solid perfect within the realm of possibility for you. You just haven't done it yet. But it's a real stretch goal. And the thing about it is, if you set your goal right, it forces you out of your current modus operandi. There's several things about goal setting that I think are real key points. If you're shooting to make this kind of an exponential leap in performance, so then first it needs to be a serious stretch goal. You need to scare the horses. But secondly, it needs to be a goal that it needs to be a love story around that goal, I think. Because when you go for a big goal, any goal of much significance, you're going to have some setbacks. You're going to have some obstacles that come along. You're going to get kind of banged up and bruised up maybe. And you need to care enough. You know, the heart is what sustains you through that. And so there, you know, people talk about a passion for this goal. And I think, well, that's a fine word and it fits. But some people say, well, I just don't have that passion. Well, you just need to care for it, or at least be committed enough to it that you say, I'm going to stay the course. I will put myself out there. And I think that it needs to be your goal, not somebody else's goal for you. Not a should or ought to goal. I think the fundamental mistake that a lot of people make is they don't believe in themselves enough. And they don't reach high enough. Is it Astro Teller, who is the head of Google X, you know, their innovative arm, that said 10% can be as hard as 10x. You know, a 10% improvement, not necessarily any improver. Small acquisitions were every bit as difficult to make work as the big ones, which is kind of a counterintuitive thought. I mean, normally people don't go out with their mind drifting down that path. But U Squared, the handbook, it's kind of based on counterintuitive ideals, kind of things that stop you and kind of, you know, make yourself uncomfortable. You know, that's one of the points. Well, why would I want to do that? You're an athlete. If you're not willing to make yourself uncomfortable, you got to get off the field. People are so different. I mean, they're so alike too. But they're so different, and some people just have a much higher need for achievement. Some people have a much higher energy level, and some, you know, on and on and on.
The human needs might be different.
They're just different. Some people want a job that they want to nurture other people. I got a PhD in psychology. I did a year-long clinical internship. I worked on a psychiatric ward. That is not. And I knew from the word go that was not where I would end up. It just, but you got people, they're drawn to that, and that's the wonderful thing about the world, the difference. But the truth is, I don't care what direction a person is drawn. They can make quantum leaps in that zone. Whatever their strike zone is. But I don't really spend a lot of time, I guess, trying to talk people into making a quantum leap unless they have something inside. That want to factor, that's the X factor. And, you know, people talk about willpower. Well, I want to talk about want power. Want power is, how much do you want this thing? again, how much are you in love with this ideal? I do think that there are times when we're kind of directionless, or a person certainly can be. And so for that poor soul, although they might be happy, content, doing fine really, but they kind of like something to change and be bigger and better and more dramatic or whatever. And so sometimes I think we can maybe find that magical era just by playing with a curiosity, or saying yes to a random opportunity that just comes smack in front of us, or maybe deciding, well, I'm going to muscle up one of my superpowers. I'm just sort of really get into that because I have fun with that and I'm good at it. So those are things I think that one can play with. I think you make a decision. One of the chapters in the U-Squared Handbook is make your move before you're ready. I'll tell you where big dreams go to die. They go to the planning place, getting ready place, preparing myself. And it's the biggest con job we work on ourselves. There are so many bones of big dreams in that graveyard where people, it's always something that there's always going to be a set of reasons to wait. And it's like Gilda Radner, that line of hers on Saturday Night Live, it's always something. Well, it is. And so when are you going to take the risk? You pick 10 people at random, and I'll bet $100 that we can find quantum leaps in every one. And if you stop and think about it, everybody's made quantum leaps before they reach school age. Because you come into this world naked. You can't speak. You can't feed yourself. You can't get around. And by the age of 3, you're doing all 3 of those things. Now, what that child did, they were willing to fail over and over again. They had no methodology. They just knew what they wanted. And they were willing to make mistakes to show them the way there. And it's the same thing when they learn to ride a bicycle, when they learn to swim, when they learn to run as opposed to walk. And so those are all, that's not an incremental thing. You can't crawl fast enough to become a walker. You got to change the game. It's a totally different game. Wading is W-A-D-I-N-G in the water. It's that process of being willing to take new risks, change your modus operandi, fail your way to success. Mm-hmm. Well, you get to choose how you behave. To heck with your thinking. And let's say your thinking is what it is, and it's riddled with doubt. You're ravaged with doubt. You still get to choose how you behave. And you can act like you've got what it takes. And you can feel like I'm faking this. Oh, am I ever faking this? But so that's one thing. And just go against everything that's going on inside you, because most people are not going to know. But there's another thing. Manage your remembering. When you go back over the years, I can go back and just like that. I can think something, and I can pull up again and again and again. All these times that I've been embarrassed, I've been humiliated, I've failed, dropped the ball. I can dwell on that if I want to, but I can also go back and the times that I pulled it off, the times I did it right, I surprised myself, how good it felt when I was good to somebody else. On and on and on. So you get to dwell on whatever you want to dwell on, and we're too indiscriminate. It's kind of like these two voices we got in our head. We got a hero voice and we got a villain voice. And who are you going to give airtime to? People talk about having a coach. Well, the coach that is closest to you is the voices inside your head. You're coaching yourself all the time. And you get to decide which voice you want to hand the mic to. And the villain voice is very compelling. And he's a con artist, because so much of the time he's like, I'm here to protect you, buddy. I'm on your side. I'm going to keep you from screwing up. I don't want you to fail. I don't want you to embarrass yourself. Just listen to me now. And so he focuses on mistakes, on your weaker points, and all the why nots. Your hero voice focuses on your strengths, your accomplishments, and so on and so on. They say we have some 50,000 thoughts a day. I don't know if that's right, but that let's just say that's the realm that we have some 50,000 thoughts a day. This kind of takes us into this whole conversation, which I think is an interesting thing to kick around, which is this whole thing about optimism versus pessimism. That's kind of what, if we want to give big labels to what we're talking about here. If you ask people, and I've asked this of crowds, keynote after keynote after keynote, training sessions and so on, 78% of the people in America label themselves optimists. 17% say, yeah, I'm pessimist. And maybe they're kind of even proud of it. But then there's a few percentages missing. And invariably, you'll have someone, particularly if it's a small enough group, and they'll speak up. They'll say, well, I consider myself objective. I'm not really optimistic. Well, they're pessimistic. They're the pessimists in wolf's clothing, typically. But the split, really, in the United States is 50-50. And so you've got 50 to 78%, you got 18% of the people that are being a little generous with themselves. And so we kind of grow up, I guess, in general, you just kind of pick up this message, this idea that you're supposed to think positive, think more positive thoughts. And you may have read about this, but and I will ask crowds this, which do you think is more important, more positive thinking or less negative thinking? And I say, this is not a trick question. And I'll let them wrestle with that for a little bit. And for the group that we're talking to today, it's a very provocative question. Which is more important? Where do you get the most mileage? More positive thinking or less negative thinking? And the studies are unequivocal. It's less negative thinking. Now, the thing that gets us tangled up is that I guess pretty much all of us think of it as, okay, you've got this linear scale here, and we'll say at the high end, the good end is optimism, and at the low end is pessimism, negative thinking. Well, studies showed that there are actually two different scales. Really. And this is just fascinating to me. Positive thinking is important. And keep it up, keep it high. But if you want to get your real knowledge, just cut down on the negative thinking. Cut it down, cut it down, cut it down. That's the villain voice. That's the critic in your head. That's the demotivator. That's the discounter. That's the one that raises the doubts. And you can shut it up. About 70% of our negative thinking goes unperceived by us. It is so embedded, about 70%. It is so much just ingrained in the way we go about living. So let me tell you how it shows up. I'll talk about the 5 C's, the sneak attack of the 5 C's. Okay, the first one is complaining. Grapping. It's too hot in Dallas. Well, it is. Yeah. But that's not going to change if I gripe about it. Okay, so the first one is complaining. The next one's criticizing. Well, the grid went down today in Texas. We had brownouts. My air conditioners, and like there's always someone to criticize. So we've got complaining, we've got criticizing. Next one is concern. And I'm not talking about being empathic here and having concern for some other person. I'm talking about garden variety worrying. I'm concerned about this. Well, I'm concerned about inflation. Well, I'm concerned about, the news. All right. The next one is commiserating. We come in and I sit down with this person and they start their C's. Yeah, I understand. I'm not doing anybody any good. When I start commiserating, I'm not doing anyone any good. It's destructive to both of us. And then the last one is catastrophizing, which is just when you're really down, you just blow things all out of proportion. But those things sneak in. If you start watching people, watching ourselves, how much we do this, and of course, we're surrounded by so much negativity. You go, you listen to the news, you get on social media, and on and on and on. Now, here's what's interesting. So we're talking about making a quantum leap. We're talking about change. And really, if you said, what are you all about, Price? What, your life, where did you point yourself? Well, I just got caught up in positioning people to do more with themselves. There's so much out there, and people have so much potential to do things with themselves. Let's arm them. Let's position them to do what they can do with themselves. When someone decides they want to make a quantum leap, they're talking about major change. Now let's talk about what happens when change hits. In this case, self-imposed change. Now, I've seen this for decades in organizations where it's major change. You're being acquired. You're being merged. You're being downsized. You're being restructured. Okay? And so it's self-imposed when we're making a quantum leap. But the same dynamics come into play as when the world, our world, the company we work for, or whatever, the organization that we're stuck in, all of a sudden takes a hard right turn. So here's what happens when change hits. The first scan is for danger. What could go wrong here? How could I get hurt in this deal? What's going to happen to me? And all of these me issues come into mind. John Dryden said self-defense is nature's oldest law. And so our defense mechanisms come into play. But when change hits, whether it's imposed on us or self-imposed, the first thing that happens is, okay, things are changing and the future gets a little blurry. So we got a new dose of ambiguity and uncertainty. Okay? And people vary greatly in their tolerance for ambiguity. The second thing that happens is the trust level drops in an organization. You're going to change yourself, make a quantum leap, the trust level in yourself drops too. The villain voice goes crazy with that. So we got the ambiguity and uncertainty, the drop in self-trust, and then self-preservation takes over as a driver of behavior. It does in an organization, and it does in you as an individual when you start to make a quantum leap. Okay, and so we're in the negative zone now. And we may be griping, we may be criticizing, complaining, all of this kind of commiserating with the people around us. What is so important is for people to know what's coming. People don't tell them. I think this is one of the things that is a little bit of a problem with a lot of the self-improvement books. Go do this, do magnificent things. But by the way, en route, let's not talk about that. If you will tell people what's coming, it does so much to equip them to deal with it. They know what's happening. I always knew if I was doing a keynote, it might be just the top deck of officers in a company, or it might be 100 middle managers that you're talking to, but I'm going to tell you what's coming. It's like day one can be very exciting, but there's always day two. Brene Brown talks about day two. You can't escape day two. And it goes back to that old saying about the messy middle. And it's kind of like if I want to redo my house, my kitchen. I've got this glorious idea of what the kitchen is going to look like once we redo it and everything. It's chaos. You got dirt everywhere. You got holes in the wall. You got wires hanging. It's a passage, and people need to understand it's a journey, but if you don't tell them that, they get lost in the desert. Daniel Kahneman is a world-renowned psychologist, one of the most respected psychologists in the world today. He won the Nobel Prize in economics, not psychology. But he's written several books. But one of the things that is, again, just one of these killer insights or things that the research that he conducted found was that as humans, we weigh losses twice as heavily as we do gains. We weigh potential losses, imagined losses, twice as heavily as we do gains. So, for example, if I said to somebody, flip a coin, got a $100 bill here. If you get it right, you get the 100. If you get it wrong, you pay me 100. And usually people won't take you up on that deal. People immediately, they're focusing on the negative, remember. You've got self-defense working overtime, self-preservation going like crazy, and people are sizing up all the ways they can lose in this proposition. You need to have, in neon lights, a picture of the promised land. Secondly, you need to get the message across that this is the valley of tears. This is a passage. It doesn't stay like this. Let me give you an example that you stay very fit. You were an amazing athlete. When, let's say, if you or I or anybody goes to the gym and we're going to do a new workout routine. Okay, this week I'm up in the iron. And not just that, I'm going to do 3 sets of squats instead of 2, and so on and so on. Well, you come out of that sore, okay? But you don't think, well, if I keep lifting like this, I will live sore forever. But you don't. You develop the muscles. You work through it. Well, in change, or as an organization or as an individual, you go through psychological soreness. And people need to know that this is a passage, that these are the rites of passage, that you go through to something greater. If you're a good executive, you will get before your people and you level with them. So it's going to be painful, it's going to be messy, we're going to make some mistakes. But look, we've got to do this. We need to do this. And look what it's going to be like. And you have to sell the milk and honey, and as an individual, you've got to keep your eye on that magnificent obsession that represents your quantum leap goal. You've got to live with that thing. You got to make love to that thing. You've got to, and we need to tell ourselves that kind of thing. Run across this book by Maria Konnikova called The Biggest Bluff. He does this study he studies poker hands online, hundreds of thousands of them over a 6-month period. And what he found is that having the best hand won only 12% of the time. The vast percentage of the time, it was the best player. And so I think what we're talking about here is, and what I'm trying to do in U Squared is, here's how you play. There are always going to be constraints, always going to be limitations. And if we can hack that and use them to our advantage, because so much of the time, well, we need constraints. Sometimes I'm going to try to write a blog, and I can't figure out what in the heck to write because, well, there are too many things. But if Kim, who's over our publishing wing, if she comes in and says, I would like for you to write a blog about X. Oh, it's a funny. All of a sudden, I've got some constraints. It's boxed. And she says, and we need it by day after tomorrow. And it can't be like anything you've written before. Selective persistence is very important. And so how do we know that we're being smartly, selectively persisting? It is so hard for people to change their approach. It's easier for somebody to start something brand spanking new, like we're going to start a rock and roll band. Well, that was outrageous. That was a rabid dream of some kind, but it wasn't like changing from something else in that same genre, so to speak. I find it's hard even for me and our company to really change the game. That's why your goal needs to be really, really a stretch goal. And so it forces innovation, it forces creativity, it forces you toward the fast lane. And then people fall into that thing of, I don't have this, and I don't have this, and I don't have this, and yeah, that's okay. We're teaching you how to play the hand. Your cards suck, but man, you've got good enough cards. But I think that really is a tough one for people. Really what you're asking them to do is take a new set of risks. And immediately what happens, just like Daniel Kahneman says, we start weighing the losses heavier than the potential gains. What if I make an absolute idiot of myself? What if my mate leaves me? I don't know. And we go into that catastrophizing stuff usually, and we lose sight of the goal. We quit romancing that stone, okay? And so it's a tricky thing, and it goes back to that core issue you talked about, Louis, of self-belief. And we're asking people to become childlike again. Kid doesn't give a damn that it's got food all over its face. It's learning to feed itself. The kid, let's say it can wade, but it can't swim. It wants to swim. My big brother can swim. All my friends, they can swim already. This sucks, And so they strangle themselves. They get strangled, they choke, and all this kind of stuff, and they're splashing water everywhere, but there is this fierce determination to pull it off. There's another thing that I love. I wrote a blog some time ago called Naive Ambition. I love it, and that's what we see in younger people, is that a willingness to take new risks. And if the thing is, we don't study the downside of the way we're doing it. We don't identify the risks that we're taking now, because they're just part of our lifestyle. We hadn't started the rock band. I was risking, I wouldn't have been as popular. I would have never had a record that made the top 100. And on, the joy that we got out of that. If we could have kept on doing in my company the same things that we were doing when I started the company. We took some risks, set outrageous goals, but anyway, it's hard for people. There are so many things that you're capable of doing that you don't know how to do. I think I said this earlier. Anything of significance that any of us have pulled off in our life, we didn't know how to do it initially. I didn't know how to drive. Before I started driving, and you learn how to drive. And we could go on and on and on. And it's bizarre how we reach the point of we won't put ourselves into that cockpit again, And it's this kind of stuff that goes on in our heads. That's a wrong assumption, but it's kind of how people go around living. This is the way our life starts. We accumulate, we grow, we get better, and we're accumulators, and we're muscling up, and we build our social network and our net worth and our information base and on and on. There's a wretched thing that happens, I'm going to say, if you want a pivot point, about in the late 50s. And there's an inversion, and we start this way. And we take fewer risks. There are several things that drive this. One, we may be comfortable enough financially. Our energy level goes down. We need to be doing something that we want to do. I love to write, and I can still write. That's beautiful. It doesn't take a lot of energy to write. I need to be on the move. I get disgusted with myself sometimes following the same route to work, spend the same hours a day, go back home, and so I need variety. But I think some people don't need as much. Some people don't need adventure in their life like I do. But I think if you're playing to your strengths and you're letting yourself do things that you love to do, that's one thing. In my professional opinion, the single most important factor for success in the business world is a high energy level. He ranks it above everything. Looks, social skills. It wasn't that he discounted some of these other things. There are a lot of things that come into play. We know that. I think that the corporate energy level is the most overlooked asset or factor when people talk about corporate culture. People don't pay a bit of attention to it, it seems like. When I think about this, if you go to the dictionary and you look up the definition of energy, get this. The formal definition, the physics definition, is the capacity to do work. I think that is a beautiful line. Well, why do we hire people? Why do we promote people? For their capacity to do work. We demote them, we pay them less or whatever. The capacity to do work. Okay. When there's no energy, everything stops. And the people with lower energy, I saw them, they just weren't as big an achievers. They might have killer brain power, but the energy level wasn't there. The motor, their metabolic rate, whatever you want to call it, it wasn't there. I think some people just come more gifted than others. I'm convinced of that, first of all. Some people come with a 4-cylinder, some people come with a 12-cylinder, okay? Some people, they come with a good, strong engine, but they put low-octane, watery gas. They don't eat right. Some don't keep their motor tuned. They don't work out. They just don't stay fit, and the energy level goes down. I think that you used the word friction earlier, and there is a good side to friction, as we know. We need friction in life. I mean, that's what's going on when you're pumping the iron or you're doing those workouts on the gridiron or whatever. And you have to use muscle to build muscle. And it's kind of like you got to spend money to make money. And so some friction is good. You need something to be responsible for. Studies have found that in nursing homes, give this elderly person a plant that they've got to take care of. They live longer. Yeah, I'm talking about living longer. There was a study, and we were talking about optimism, pessimism. There was a famous 50-year study of nuns, one of the best longitudinal studies ever. And they tested them at the beginning of this period, and the optimists lived 10 years longer. 10 years longer than the pessimists. And so what this says to us is that pessimistic thinking is more dangerous than smoking. Well, if you do smoke, if you're a man, it takes 5.5 years off your life, so they say. That's the last statistics I saw. If you're a woman, it takes 7 years off your life. I don't know why, but those are statistics. So, I mean, if you don't think it's important to manage your mind, to manage that mental traffic that's cruising through your brain, it's a longevity game that we're talking about here. That's not fun. There's this bumper sticker. I think it's the favorite bumper sticker I ever saw. It says, And it was a picture of a bumper on an old, rusted, dirty car. The bumper sticker was worn and everything, but it said, "No use being pessimistic. Wouldn't work anyway." And that was kind of my dad's thinking. He just wasn't going to put himself through that. And my dad, I never saw him contemplate the idea of even parking in a handicapped place. I never heard him gripe about that, really. It was just like how he chose to deal with that trauma. This is a gift. It's not only just delightful, just fun, kicking ideas around. It's really gratifying, and so I appreciate that. And I would not ask anything more. I feel hugely gifted. Maybe you should stick with this. I've said it many times to a group of people when I would start to present to them. I'd say, I want to share with you 3 great truths. That's how I start. First of all, you are the most powerful person in your life. You have the power of choice and so on and so forth. Point 2, you have an amazing capacity for change. And 3, you are the solution to your future. It's not your daddy. It's not your boyfriend. It's not your boss. You are the solution to your future. And I want you to remember the first 2 points. No. You are the most powerful person in your life.